Did you know that a woman let spirits possess her in the 1800s in order to help them move on? This is the completely wild and strange story of Mary Lorenzi Venom. Buckle in, guys, this is a weird one. In 1877, when Lorenzi was 13 years old, she started having some weird health complications. She would have extreme dizzy spells, become very disoriented, and just completely disassociated. In July, it became apparent that something was very off. She would fall into deep sleeps during the day and wouldn't be able to be woken up. She started sleep talking. She would talk about angels and demons and speak for deceased relatives that she didn't know. She even started sleepwalking. And when she woke up, she would have no recollection of these events. And if that's not weird enough, her voice began to change into the relative that she was speaking for. It was just bonkers. The story of Mary Lorenzi Venom escalates rather quickly after she began falling into these trance-like sleeps. It starts with her talking for long since deceased relatives in these trances, and escalates to their voices coming through her body out of her mouth. I mean, how screwed up is that? Imagine having your daughter fall into a narcoleptic sleep, unable to be woken up, and you hear your great-grandfather's voice come out of her mouth. I mean, that's a little odd. And I don't know, that would be all the evidence I needed to prove that she was in fact speaking for this person with them in her body. It was never rainbows and sunshine though. It got to the point where Lorenzi was running through her house trying to get away from spirits in her sleep, and again she would wake up and have no recollection of any of this happening. Parents then brought her to medical professionals because they didn't really believe that she was a medium channeling spirits, and her health was on just a very steady decline. But the doctors could find no reason for this. There was nothing wrong internally. So eventually they diagnosed her with severe mental illness and recommended that she be sent to a state mental asylum. Her parents were getting ready to send her to this asylum in 1877 where she would be kept in confinement until a man interfered. And this is where it gets really, really interesting. The story of Mary Lorenzi Venom gives me the chills, and at this point in the story where her parents are getting ready to send her to a state asylum, word of these happenings had spread far and wide throughout the spiritualist community. Finally, a man intervened and told her parents not to send her. He had a crazy story. This is where Mary Roth would come in, who was the spiritualist's daughter. And her story held such striking similarities to Lorenzi's that he couldn't just sit by and let the same thing happen to Lorenzi that happened to his daughter. Mary Roth was born in 1846, and her story, as I said before, holds striking similarities and parallels to Lorenzi. Although in her story, her parents actually did send her to an asylum as recommended by medical professionals when she got diagnosed with a mental illness. Mary's ability scared everyone in the asylum, not just because it was very obvious that she was harnessing spirits through her body, but also she was having premonitions that would come true to the smallest detail. So they put her into further isolation, where she eventually unalived herself because she just couldn't take it anymore. Roth's father did not want the same thing to happen to Lorenzi, so he convinced her parents to let her stay home and stay free. Eventually, Lorenzi ended up channeling Mary through her body, and Mary said that Lorenzi was very, very ill, and she would surely die if they didn't do something about it. What had to happen was Mary had to stay in Lorenzi's body for months, 3 months exactly, while Lorenzi's soul went up with the angels in heaven to heal and reflourish, so to say. Even though it had never been done before, it was decided that Mary would stay in Lorenzi's body for 3 months and go home with her family. This is an extended period of time to be in a trance, which no one knew what would happen, but both families agreed. And even though Lorenzi didn't know anything about the Roth family, it became quite apparent that she really was channeling Mary, because she knew very, very specific details that no one other than Mary and her parents and some of her extended family would know. And after the 3 months, Lorenzi's health went back to normal, and when Mary finally left her body, she was completely healthy again and started doing this on a regular basis where she would help spirits move on. If you guys are interested in learning more about this or just talking more about it, there's actually a 2015 horror movie called Anguish that is based on these events. So definitely go check that out, watch it, and let me know what you think.
This woman came back from the grave to solve her own murder, and I'm obsessed with her. On February 21st, 1977, Teresita Basa finished up her shift as a respiratory specialist at Edgewater Hospital in Chicago and returned home. Around 7:30 p.m., her friend Ruth Loeb called. They talked for about 20 minutes until Teresita said she had to go because she was expecting a male visitor. Apparently, Ruth had no follow-up questions about this. At 8:40 p.m., Teresita's neighbors smelled smoke, so they called the building's janitor, who called the fire department. Inside Teresita's apartment, firefighters found a mattress in the middle of the living room floor engulfed in flames. Under the mattress was the body of Teresita Basa. She was undressed and she had been stabbed in the chest. Smoke and fire damage had eliminated all physical evidence and fingerprints, but it was clear that there had been a struggle and the apartment had been totally ransacked. The only solid piece of evidence was a note in the apartment that read, "Get theater tickets for AS." The case went cold after only a couple months. But then, in July of that same year, lead investigator Joe Stachula got a call from police in Evanston. They had spoken to a man named Dr. Jose Chua who had information about the murder of Teresita Basa. And that information had come from Teresita herself. Part 2 is up and it is linked in the comments. This is part 2 of the murder of Teresita Basa. So Detective Joe Stachula got a call from a doctor in Evanston. Dr. Jose Chua said that his wife, Remy, had worked with Teresita Basa at the hospital, and that one night Remy had spoken in her sleep in a voice that Jose didn't recognize. The voice said that she was Teresita Basa and that she knew who her murderer was. She had been killed by a man named Alan Showery, an orderly at the hospital, and she asked Jose to go to the police. Remy woke up and had no memory of what had happened, so Jose didn't go to the police. But Teresita came back a week later, and she was pissed. Jose told her he couldn't go to the police without any evidence, and Teresita told Jose that Alan had stolen some of her jewelry and given it to his girlfriend. And she provided the names and phone numbers of 4 people who could identify the jewelry. So Jose went to the police. And the police found that Alan Showery was indeed an orderly at Edgewater Hospital. And their co-workers said that Alan was supposed to go to Teresita's apartment the night she was murdered to fix her TV. They called Alan in for questioning. And he said yes, he went over to fix the TV, but he didn't have the right tools, so he went home to fix an electrical problem that he and his girlfriend had been having. And Alan's girlfriend said they weren't having any electrical problems, and even if they were, Alan would not know how to fix them. She also told them that Alan had given her some jewelry in late February. So detectives brought in the people that Teresita had told Jose about, and they positively identified Teresita's jewelry. In the face of this evidence, Alan told police everything. He went over to fix Teresita's TV, but he was actually planning on robbing her for rent money. She let him in, and as soon as she turned her back to lock the door, he strangled her from behind. He removed her clothing to make it look like an assault and then set the fire to get rid of any evidence. And he only found $30 in cash, so he took some jewelry. Alan pled not guilty, but his case ended in a mistrial due to a hung jury. Then he suddenly changed his plea to guilty, and he was sentenced to 14 years in prison. And some say that he changed his plea after he was visited by Teresita's ghost in prison.